Today we're going to be looking at the Dynasty Fantasy Football trade market. We're going to be looking at some player values. We're going to be looking at the market. We're going to see whether or not we're going to want to buy or sell these players. Or look in the future to see when we want to buy, when we want to sell, what could potentially happen. Are they overvalued, undervalued, yada, yada, yada. But before we dig in, you need to click that subscribe button right now. Because we're talking about these players every day, looking for trades, looking for values, trying to find those edges to help you build your dynasty team and win your leagues. Click that button. Stop missing out. Ric Flair's watching you. He's right there. Do not disappoint Ric Flair. But to start things off, it's Combine Week. It's going to be a big week when it comes to looking at these rookie drafts, looking at these values. Some guys are going to jump the board. Some guys are going to be a narrative. We're going to cover that all throughout the weekend. Both sides of the ball this time around with reactions. Reactions will be just on the combine, not the whole player, because we do that every day. On top of this, we're looking at some of these running backs coming in. Some of these running backs that are veterans might be impacted more than others, but it's so deep of a running back class that all 32 teams, somewhere between rounds 1 to UDFA, has a chance to bring in an impactful running back. That is something of note. You're looking at Chuba Hubbard. The thing about Chuba Hubbard is the market, considering the production we got last year in a contract, is a little bit lower on him, which means that we can strategize around that a little bit if it's possible. I think whoever has Chuba Hubbard knows that he was hot last year, so I don't think he's going to be 100% liquid, sellable, buyable on the market as much as the charts say in your league. You see that, but it's not always realistic. It's just how it is from league to league. But you're looking at RB19 as a peel back player, like saying you want to pick up some picks. You got a running back, a wide receiver that's valued a little bit higher that you're not too into. It's on you which player it is. And you want to peel back, but you still want to get the production, but you still want to get some draft capital for now, the future, whatever. This could be an option for you. The only thing that's going to impact him from not being productive is being injured. There is a chance that they bring in another running back this year through the draft, because 7th round, 6th round, 5th round, those running backs compared to like last year's draft or the normal draft class are going to be valued more like 4th round talents or better. And that being said, when you're thinking of it along those lines, those players are going to come to these teams at a discount. So any team can get it. Any team can get it that late in the draft. But Chuba Hubbard, probably one of the more steady running backs within all 32 NFL teams locked in their role. And they love him. They love him. They did not have to sign him. 25.7 years old. We're right in the thick of his career right now. Got a few more years as a Panther. You're catching him on the cheap, especially in startup drafts. Especially here. Snap share up there. Opportunity share up top 4. That's what you really want to look at. You want to look at the opportunity share. The opportunities lead to fantasy points. We're up there, top 4 in the league. And then RB19 when it comes to value, fantasy points per game. 13 among running backs. RB19. Of course, we're on the Panthers too, so some of those games were a little bit sketchy when it comes to leading in production. Going back to here, though, there aren't many low games. The low games, he didn't kill you. He just did not kill you hardly at all. He killed you, 3 weeks out of the year, 4 weeks out of the year? Really just did that to you? Nothing really to be scared about with Chuba Hubbard there. Going back to here, route participation rate. Ranked 9th among running backs. Breakaway runs, 6th among running backs. Yards created, 14th among running backs, which is okay. Which is very good. That being said, we're a workhorse. But we're not getting ran to death too. I butted him up against Kyren Williams a lot during the season, months ago. And the thing about Chuba versus Kyren Williams, he was not getting ran down with snaps. Ran down with work. Ran down with pass blocking snaps. There were games where Miles Sanders would get like 20 routes in a game. Get a little bit of opportunity. They'd allow him to get a little run. They allowed him to breathe the grass. They did not let Blake Corum do that with the Rams. But running him up against the Kyren Williams, the difference is he might be able to hold up a little bit longer. He's not getting ran down, won't run down throughout the back end of the season, and neither running back might ever run down. But that's the one thing. 250 rushing attempts. Still one of the most productive running backs in the league. You're catching him at a value. Adjacent players. I mean, Quinshon Judkins, that's a talent I don't want to miss out on. Caleb Johnson as well. A late first in 2026 is what they got here. Like I always say, this is not in concrete, so you got to be creative with it. That's just not how leagues work. So a list, ADP, rankings, a keep trade cut, all those tools, they're tools, but they're not 100% real when you're actually working with live people. That's why people say all this stuff doesn't work and doesn't matter when it comes to trade calculators, keep trade cut, everything else. Keep that in mind, but it gives you a gauge on how to be creative with your deals. But with Chuba Hubbard and the one process we have, whenever you see that chart go down or up like that drastically, good time to kick the tires. Good time to kick the tires. One thing to know, he's got a potential out after 2025, but I don't think it's that drastic for him where they might keep him around as long as possible, maybe do a restructure here and there, or maybe they cut ties somewhere down the line. But Chuba Hubbard here, locked in with the Panthers. You're playing redraft with your running backs. You're looking to appeal back, trade back with your trade on your positional players, looking to pick up some draft picks. This might be an option for you, but David Montgomery, very interesting guy coming into 2025. We had that knee issue. We rehabbed it. We came back. Are we still going to have that issue starting the season? That is the question here. The market's like RB22. Is this going to be more Jahmyr Gibbs and less David Montgomery? Is that knee issue worrisome? Is there a chance that the Lions draft another running back, 4th, 5th round? And this time when you draft a day 3 running back, there could be some consequences. There could be. And it's not like that's out of the picture. They did that last year in the 4th round. That's a question to look at. And it's not like I don't think this will happen. I don't think that will. Once you're that deep in a draft and a player falls to you that you like, and it's a 6th round and you wanted to draft them in the 3rd, and that could happen at the running back position, that is something to be weary of. The thing about David Montgomery, he's rock solid. Double digits every week he's on the field except for week 15. That is the thing about David Montgomery. He is rock solid, steady Eddie. You get that at RB22. He's not young anymore. Older running backs, you don't want to collect those unless you're in it to win it. Unless you're in it to win it. However, the value's treading down here as it should be going into the offseason for an older running back coming back from an injury, especially later in the season. That is something to look at. So you might be able to swoop in on the cheap here, but it's also going to have some volatility that you may not want to look at. Opportunity share, 35th among running backs, but we're getting a lot of goal line looks. 13th among running backs with red zone opportunities with Jahmyr Gibbs there. That's a solid look. 32nd in targets. This is a running back that's just primed in the right situation here in an offense that moves the ball and is in a good role here that you can money ball a little bit. The thing about buying or selling is you really got to time the market. That knee going into this year, are you going to be wishful on that? Are you going to question that? And I don't have the answer for that. I'm not hanging out with him. The coaches may not even really fully know. They're really just getting ready for the offseason, the draft. They may talk to him a bit, talk to the trainers and stuff. They may not know more till it's a little bit later into the game. Yards created, 21st among running backs. Yards created per touch, though, 12th. So we're very efficient last year in this offense. Juke rate, 4th among running backs. So we still got a little bit of juice. However, that juice is going to start straightening out. Great for a win-now team. Horrific for a rebuilding team. I think that's common sense due to the age. Also, when you look at the contract here and look at what could be potentially happening with him, we got a potential out coming up. So this could be a time where the Lions do look at running back for a backup, for another guy in the system there to wheel up. If they're looking to get out of this, that could potentially happen, or it could happen in 2026 or so. Something to pay attention to. He's also in a weird area of value here when it's him among running backs. Tyron Tracy, Joe Mixon, Caleb Johnson. So high-end rookies is in his area, kind of, sort of, not really. Honestly, if you look at this, it's really hard to value him with Chuba, Quinshawn, Caleb Johnson. Maybe not Chuba, but Caleb Johnson, Quinshawn. I'm trying to look at the rookies, really. It's hard to make that. No one's making that move. No one's making that trade. It's just a list of players to be creative with. You're going to have to add a good bit to that, and I don't think he's going to be the main focal point. Coming off of an injury, going to be 28 years old to start the season, something you're going to look at. You're going to have to be creative, and you're probably going to have to go vet for vet or vet for a cheaper pick. That's what you're looking at. Early second's going to be hard in 2025. It says that close in value. That's going to be hard to do in this year's draft. Some other drafts, maybe. This year, no. There's too many good running backs. You get in the back end of the first round of your rookie draft, and what if it's super flex 2 or tight end premium? No way. So you're going to have to look at this and be a little bit creative when it comes to the values. You do have to think ahead with David Montgomery. You really have to think about the knee issue. You got to think about the potential out on the contract here. They're going to have to moneyball him a little bit. The draft is very impactful for all 32 NFL teams. I do not expect any of these running backs to be drafted to compete with Gibbs, but they're all also trying to optimize a depth chart here. So if they can find a back, or if a back falls to them in the 7th round, they're looking at probably a 4th round talent coming their way on the cheap. That could be a player that could be impactful on this depth chart once we get into training camp, maybe 2 training camps from now, something like that down the road. Tyreek Hill, he is tanking. He is Tank Hill right now. He is Hank Hill. Hank Hilling up. And he wasn't gassing up, so we weren't getting that propane from the Hank Hill last year. Working through some injuries. 2 had another concussion. 12.8 PPR points per game. 31-year-old wide receivers are something you usually don't invest in, especially speed-based wide receivers. It's obvious, right? Like, you're a win-now team, you're cool, but you're kind of speculative. If you're a rebuilding team, you got to get the hell out. You got to get the hell out if you're a rebuilding team, right? You got to get the hell out. You got to get out now while it's good. Like, what if he comes back, bounces well this year? You're rebuilding. You're not going to win this year. What's the point? And next thing you know, he's like 33 and you're competing. And next thing you know, you're holding the bag. What are you getting out of that? I think a team that feels like and knows is totally different. If I know I'm going to make the playoffs in February of next year, unless there's a lot of injuries, if I know in my gut, I'm confident, cool. If I feel like it, still no. Because we're looking at this, it's okay, but look at the ADOT and target share. 21.9%, 11.2%. The work rate's okay. But the yards after the catch is what you want. But that was 33rd among wide receivers. Receiving yards, 27th among wide receivers. We're on the field 80% of the time. Fine. There's a lot of issues with the Miami Dolphins. That could come back. But we're also playing this game long term. If we were playing redraft, be a little bit more bullish, saying, hey, we got the speed, we got the upside on any given play. Anything could happen with this guy. He's a great volatile option. He gets pushed downfield a bit. They had some issues last year. 31 years old, we're playing Dynasty Fantasy Football. I'm trying to build a team for the long term, and I want stacked out wide receiver, and I want to be stacked for the long term. And I do not want to have players that will be holes in my roster 2 years from now if I'm not competing right now. Obviously, you would like him if you're competing right now and just take that gamble due to what he is. 959 yards last year, 6 touchdowns. All that could increase. All that could come up, but it's probably not for long. Another thing you want to look at is the contract. You're playing with some fire here. Potential out after 2025. So you might be dancing with one more year with the Dolphins. Then after that, it's very speculatory. And then we're going to be an older player. At that time, we're going to be around 32 years old. If that happens, maybe we work a deal. Maybe not. But this is an interesting player. You got other veterans to look at. You got draft picks to look at. This is a player that can be very fluid in your rookie drafts due to that name cachet. Like you say, keep trade cuts not real. This is a potential point Where in the right league, keep trade cuts not real, and you can catch more value than wide receiver 39. Other leagues, no. Other leagues, no. I've been in some crazy leagues where crazy trades happen. Remember, we had some injuries last year. The Dolphins were crazy last year. The production could ramp back up. That could potentially happen. But if you're not in a position to enjoy the production, then you're not in a position to enjoy Hank Hill right now. And he ain't cooking up that gas right now either. So the value's low, the market's low. But again, short-term speculation, Tyreek Hill's a cheap get. He's a cheap get. You're looking at what he did on the field. He did solid, remember. He did solid. 21% target share, and we got 11.2 ADOT. That is something you want to look with your players. 959 yards. But Chris Godwin is a free agent. What's his best landing spot? What's his best landing spot? We're wide receiver 41 right now. The market tanked on him. We're on the field, 19.7 points per game. Everybody wants to look at points per game. 3 wide receiver 1 weeks, but we were steady. We weren't taking dumps on the field. Even our bad games, we were hitting double digits. It's not going to win it, but it ain't going to kill you. Not like 3, 4, 5 points. He's a steady player. The big question is the ankle. How jacked up is that guy? How jacked up is that going into the season? We will know that in free agency when they throw the money at him. If money gets thrown at him quickly, he gets signed quickly, which could be the impact of how yucky this rookie wide receiver class is, you may want to back off. You may want to back off. However, if you get signed quick with money, that might be an indicator we're good to go. We passed medicals. We're ready to rock and roll. Look at the targets here. 8, 8, 9, 9, 6, 13, 9. I hope we stay with the Bucks and just stay with Baker Mayfield. I think this is great music. We're 29 years old. Just stay where you're comfortable at. Don't learn a new quarterback, new system. You got a quarterback here that rocks with you. Take a hometown discount, dude. Finish out that career. That's what I would want. Let me know what you want. But the target share, 26.6%, ADOT's low. That is a good target share where what we saw there is what you're going to see if this maintains. What you saw there with the production. You're going to have a few spike weeks, but due to the plethora of targets, almost 9 a game, you're going to have a nice baseline, a nice floor. But the 5.7 ADOT might give you a little bit of volatility, but when you come down on that volatility in the scoring map, it ain't going to bottom dwell. It ain't going to hit the toilet too often. That is what that says to me. Route participation rate, 96.5%. Now you got to ask the question. Jalen McMillan came out strong at the end of the season. Could that impact that? Potentially, but this team wants to roll out 3 wide receivers a lot. They like to be creative. They want to have 2 running backs on the field at the same time. He's Chris Godwin. If he's healthy and good to go, he's Chris Godwin. And he's going to do Chris Godwin things until he's not. And he should be getting that target share. And say it does reduce. We're looking at a shorter ADOT at like 22 to 25% in season. That would make his volatility a little bit more drastic, a little bit more elastic week to week. Still with some upside games, but the lower games will be a little lower. And he won't be captain, I'm safe week to week. He'll probably have a good points per game, like 15-ish or something like that. But still, when you look at that, that is the risk. That is a risk. Also, a ramp up from the injury. If we're still coming back from that and there's not much news about it, that is something to look at. But when you look at those yards, you look at what he was doing last year. If we can get back to that, you got a damn good player on the cheap. However, 29 years old, going to be 30 sooner than later. Our contract is something that we got to look at and how quick we get that, who we get that with, what team we're with. We're also a very, very nasty wide receiver. Other landing spots, the Washington landing spot is the one you're looking at for these veteran wide receivers. The Texans as well. I think Stephon Diggs would be great for them to go back to. He was great last year. A dislocated ankle is a bad injury. You want to watch that throughout the offseason. That's the big thing. When it comes to all these trades, all these adjacent players, just be creative with it. But Khalil Shakur got that contract. 4 years, $60.2 million. He had some production last year. He was okay at times. You got your 2 wide receiver 1 weeks, 3 wide receiver 2 weeks, 12.2 points per game. Really bottomed out 4 games last year, getting you 10 or more, and a slew of others while not hitting wide receiver 2 status. Looking at the targets here, it was between 5 and 11 on most games. 5 and 11 on most games. And you're catching him at wide receiver 42, 6.6 targets per game. I like looking at points per game, targets per game, but I also like looking at what they're doing weekly and what does it actually look like. What picture does it paint week to week and how those points are being flowing. Because if you're looking at the average, you're looking at the rankings, it doesn't tell you the whole story. That is something to learn about that. That is something to learn. You can get a good characteristic of how these players score points. So in this offense with this contract, I expect a player here to be steady, to have a few wide receiver 1 weeks, few wide receiver 2 weeks, steady wide receiver 3 weeks mostly. You're catching him at like a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 price tag right now. And you got a new contract. I think that's fine. A 23% target share, A-dot a little low. A-dot a little low. And that's fine. That's honestly, like, remember when we looked at the Chris Godwin scoring charts? That is probably what you'll see out of Chris Godwin. If Jalen McMillan takes a larger role, Chris Godwin does have a setback with the ankle. It takes him a little time to ramp up. And targets just start to dissipate a little bit. That's probably what you're going to see. A 23% target share and a 5.5 ADOT gets you a chart that looks like that. However, dependable. It's not going to win you leagues. It's not going to be that guy. But still, at wide receiver 42 versus wide receiver 40-something, doesn't matter. That's still good production. That's still good production for the price if you're looking for that. Route participation rate, 75%. We had an injury, too, in there. Air yards is a little bit lower, but the targets are ramping up. But we are able to make plays downfield. Target separation, 7th among wide receivers. That is something to look at. Yards after the catch, 2nd among wide receivers as well. That is something to pay attention to. He led the team in receiving, 821 passing yards. They were also in some weird game scripts last year, the Bills were. There were some games where we got to the end of the first half, and it was early in the season, but there were a few of them where there were only like 2 to 4 passing attempts, less than 10, maybe 8 to 5-ish. And that really impacted the passing game. That is something to pay attention to. A lot of these numbers, too, throughout the year were game script dependent because Cook was cooking. And on top of that, they came out with a run-first heavy attack early in the year in some of these matchups. In some of these matchups they slowed down the passing game. That is one thing to look at. If we have normal game scripts in some of those matchups, because those are real oddball, weird game scripts, we might be pushing 950 to 1,000 some yards and maybe 6 to 7 touchdowns. Maybe something like that. And I don't see that happening too much because it's so weird. But you're also looking at the adjacent players here. He's in a spot where if you want some time with your player and you want some safety, there you are with the adjacent players. Going to have to get creative with them. I don't see him being held with a death clutch right now. He's Khalil Shakur. Rookie picks, he's going to be very cheap if you're wanting to get out. Just when you get ick after like 3rd, 4th tier in your draft, maybe you want to shoot your shot, maybe not. That could be anywhere in your draft, but it's really how you feel with the player. But we do have some upside here with Khalil Shakur going into year 2 as a long-term asset with steady opportunity. Let me know what you think about him in the comments below. Make sure to hit that subscribe button on the way out. One, thanks for watching. Catch you on the next video.